All right, let's talk about Lab 7. This is the walkthrough for Lab 7. In this lab, we'll be working with a multitrack session. It's kind of a cool reggae session, once again from the Mike Senior Cambridge mixing website. Anyways, we're going to create a basic spectral balance using EQ. We're going to learn about EQing for both clarity and weight. Some of the other objectives of the lab are just to go over saving a copy of a pre-existing session, as well as creating a static mix, which we did in Lab 6, aka this is also sometimes referred to as gain staging. So we're going to be doing that, and we're going to apply some basic EQ to individual tracks as well as to the entire mix. And one of the things that we'll also do is we'll kind of dip our toe in the water, a little bit of compression and reverb. I have some like preset reverb and compression that I've put in the track that will kind of activate when we get to the final step of actually bouncing the session. And it'll just be a great way to kind of introduce you to those because, of course, in Lab 8 and Lab 9, respectively, we'll be talking about compression and reverb. Some basic shortcut keys. There's not too many today. Definitely we'll be using the toggle mix and edit window quite a bit. We'll be going back and forth probably between the two windows a lot. So it's time to use that command plus equals to swap back and forth. There's some other shortcut keys that are not on the list here that we'll cover as we go. So for the first part of the lab, you're going to download this year, month, date, your name, Lab 7 start, and we're immediately going to save a copy of it and then work from the copy. I'm not going to actually download the start one. I'm actually going to be working from the same file, except it's the finished version. And just so that this walkthrough doesn't turn into the hour and a half or 2 hours that I spent mixing it, I'm going to sort of work back from the finished version and kind of show you what I did while still going through the steps of this lab. So once you've downloaded and opened the start file, the next thing you're going to want to do is go up to File and Save Copy In, and you're going to want to save a copy of this. Keep it at 44.1, 24-bit, include those audio files. And when you go to actually save it, you can take off the copy of, but have the correct year, month, date, your name, Lab 7, and you don't have to have finished. You could just have nothing on it there and just work from that Lab 7. Once you do that, you'll bounce it. You'll still be in this session, so you need to actually go ahead and just close this session or Shift Command W or Command Shift W, and then open the copy that you made because you want to work from the copy and not from just the basic start session. This is just good practice, especially when you're downloading a mix from a client or somebody else. You just want to go ahead and make a copy of it and then work from the copy. That way, if you need it, you still always have the original session. So once we've done all that, let's go ahead and take a listen to the track. Our guide today, and any guide really when you're mixing, a great strategy or a really probably the only way to really be focused when you're mixing is have some sort of goal in mind. And just saying that you want to make things in a mix sound good or make them not sound bad, those are admirable, but those are really hard to achieve. So having a clear reference track or sort of an audio goal to be trying to reach makes mixing a lot easier and prevents you from just spending hours sort of EQing things, adding compression, making some changes, and then not really coming up with a mix that you're happy of or happy with. So what we can do, the first thing we can do is just like solo the reference track that's within the track or within the session. If you look here, there's a full multi-track session. It has all the drums, the bass, guitars, some organs, pianos, as well as a Vox comp track, which has a comped vocal already. There are the subtakes in there if you want to go back and listen to those, as well as a backing vocal. There's also a track here called Remix. So what we'll do is first of all, that track's already soloed. So why don't we play it and just take a listen to, this is the mix that was available on the Mike Senior Cambridge mixing site. So let's take a listen to it.
Babylon, come. You better run. Said the wicked man, come. Babylon, come.
So it's a pretty cool track. It's just a nice, like, kind of reggae track. You can tell there's a lot of like time bass effects. It sounds like some reverbs happening and some compression. We're just gonna, sort of hint to those today, or kind of start talking about those today. But the main thing we're going to focus on is trying to achieve sort of the same sort of spectral balance, or the same sort of EQ. And what do I mean by that? Well, a great example is if I mute this remix track and unsolo it, and we play just the rest of the track. The multi-track, the unmixed version of the session. Here's what we get.
Babylon, come. You better run. Said the wicked man, come.
Great, and let's compare that back to the reference.
Babylon, come. You better run. Said the wicked man, come.
And our multi-track one more time.
Babylon, come. You better run.
Yeah, so right off the bat, we can hear there's a big difference between the two. We can also see that our multi-track session right now, our unmixed session, is clipping. So that's not good. And then it sounds like there's one guitar. It's like one of these electric guitars that's like way too loud. And we can't hear the vocals. So we don't even have a static mix. Things are clipping. So life's not too good right now. And it definitely doesn't sound like our goal, which is this remix track or this reference track. So let's work through our towards our goal. So that's sort of what that first step there says to do, is just listen to the reference track and identify that it's different than what our reference track is, and that our goal is going to be is going to take that multi-track and make it sound more like, or as close as possible to, the reference track. And we're going to do this today by creating a static mix or gain staging using trim plugins. We're going to do some panning, as well as EQing for clarity and weight, which is kind of a new thing we'll be talking about today. Like I said, we'll also add some compression and activate some reverb that I already have like sort of pre-set up and hidden in the session. And that'll just be a great way to kind of continue the conversation in Lab 8 and Lab 9 about compression and reverb. So great, go ahead and solo that, unsolo that. The first thing we're going to do is create a static mix. If you notice, what's cool about the session is I already have all the trim plugins on the individual tracks. So all you need to do is go through and actually set the levels. So I have them color-coded here already. And I've already kind of come up with some ideas. I have some settings that I did for each one. You might want to follow this. You might want to have some other ideas. But remember, the big takeaway here is that the loudest thing, which I'm considering the vocal track, is at -3, and that I have everything that's of less importance quieter than that. So I think I have like the next most important thing is the bass at -6 and one of these high organ parts. Then after that, it's -9. And then sort of like the least important thing are those electric guitars that are like super loud right now. I have them at -15. And then I have the drums all around -12. So yeah, if you go into the session, I'm just going to go ahead and bypass all these. You can see if I select them all with Option by their nameplate and then hit Command Option, it will unbypass all the plugins there in the row. That's one of our shortcut keys for today. So yeah, if you just go through the trim plugins here, I'm just clicking through kick, rim, hi-hat. You can see they're all at -12. Later on in the mix, you can see I actually turned some of the faders down here to like -4 on the hi-hat, and then, or -7.8 on the hi-hat, and then -14 on the overheads. Because as I got towards the end of the mix, I was trying to get the drums to sound like they do in the reference track, and it just required me to actually just really turn these down even more. So otherwise though, if you notice, most of my other faders besides the bass, I lowered that a little bit as well. Most of the other faders are at 0. Let's see, our bass, like I mentioned, is at -6. If we look at, I put all the guitars at -15. This electric 3 and electric 4, they were more kind of like lead parts, so I turned those up a little bit to -9. Let's see, the high organ is at -6. That gives us that like sort of reggae offbeat kind of skank rhythm. So we'll put that in there. And then the organ low is at -9. It's kind of another bass part. And then our pianos are at -6. Our vocal is at -3, our main one, main Vox comp, and then our background is at -6. And I've also done something with the reverb here, which we'll talk about at the end to kind of make it, to sort of set it back a little bit further in the mix and not make it as exposed. So yeah, here's our mix now with just these basic static levels.
Babylana, Babylana, come. You better run. Said the wicked man, come.
I'll go and bypass all those trim plugins now.
Babylana, Babylana, come. Wicked man, run. Babylana, Babylana, come.
So you can see it was much louder when I bypassed it, but then everything was clipping and things were kind of out of control. So just by adding that trim, we've now created some headroom so that we can go ahead and not only cut some things out with EQ, but also add some volume with some additive EQ, as well as with some of the compression and other effects that we're going to use. First things first, let's deal with some panning. These are the panning decisions I made, so I'll just go ahead and set those up. I don't think I ever reset those in my lab. So actually mine are, I think, pretty close to what we have in that other window. Let's just double check. Yeah, I did move the hi-hat a little bit to the left on my track. Usually, you know, from like drummer's perspective, the hi-hat usually is a little bit to the left. Just because that's the perspective it usually is for a drummer. Let me just go through. I usually leave the bass up the middle. The guitars, I believe, these electric guitars, I pan those like 50 and 50, so I'll go and do that. Just pan one about 49 or 50 and the other one about 50. And then I also did the same thing to guitar 3. I believe I left that guitar 4, I actually had that to the right. So I put the left fader at 0 and then the right fader kept it all the way right. I think what I did then is I was trying to offset and have the organ to the left and then the piano to the right. So you can see I've kind of panned the pianos to the right, the organ to the left, and then the guitar to the right, where that kind of upstroke or skank guitar is to the left mostly. So let me just go ahead and recreate that. Just so that we kind of have that sort of consistent level there. And then I believe I just left the vocals straight up the middle. Usually bass and vocals and important things like that, and snares and things and kicks are up the middle. So yeah, it looks pretty similar to that. We can just listen to that real quick with and without. You'll see now things are a little bit more spread out.
Babylana, Babylana, come. You better run. Said the wicked man, come.
Yeah, and if anything, that just made more room for the vocals in the center, just kind of spreading everything out. So I tried to do it similar to the reference track. You can use the prescribed values I had in there, or use your own if you think some better fit the reference track. So for EQ, we're going to do two types of EQ. We're going to EQ for clarity, which is basically just getting rid of low end in tracks that either don't need low end, have low end that's not necessary, or have low end that it's sort of muddying up other parts of the low end. So I did put an actual help video in here about how to EQ for clarity. It's just like a video within a video, but it talks much about the process. I'll be using the 7-band or EQ3 7-band that comes with Pro Tools. It's pretty straightforward. It's pretty good. I do also later demo the Renaissance 6 EQ that we have in the labs. This is not something you'll have on Pro Tools, the home version, unless you have bought the Waves plugin series. So yeah, I went in and I was very specific about what cuts I made. I kind of leave it up to you if you want to cut out some low ends on tracks, but then I also tell you exactly what I did here. So if you just want to recreate that to hear how it sounds. I also made you a short video within a video here of showing you all my settings for my EQ cuts. I will go over them quickly now though here. So I'm just going to command click on the EQ plugins as I go. Do you notice when I open them here, the orange bypass button's on? So any effects that I had on there are bypassed. Of course, on this one, notice how it's no longer blued out here now. It's actually active. So there was no EQ on the kick. If I just command click on the EQ plugin here on the rim track, it will activate it. And you can see this one is actually cutting using the high pass filter. It's cutting at 24 dB per octave at a cutoff frequency of 250. So I've just turned that in to activate it, and then just set the dB per octave to the top setting, which is 24, which means anything below 250 on that rim is just not going to be part of the signal. So there might be some lower end, there might be some noise that's just down there, and it's going to muddy up my kick and my bass, and I don't need it on my rim track. I guess I felt the same way about my hi-hat track and cut everything below 250 on that. Let me activate some of these other tracks as well. Let's see. Yeah, it looks like I tried to get some of the mud out of, this is the overheads track. So the overheads is just a stereo recording of all the drums. So I tried to go through there and just get some of that mud out there. So I looked and I decided that mud was somewhere around 320 hertz. So that I was just cutting it out there. So you can see my LMF settings. My Q is at 1. My frequency is at 320 hertz, and I'm just lowering it by 6 dB. So by the way, to make sure, not only do you have to adjust the settings here, but make sure you also press the in button here to actually engage the either cut or boost that you're doing. By the way, I used that isolate function, which is Control Shift, to just find out where that mud range was, and found in the overheads, they're just around that like 250 area. There was just like a lot of buildup of stuff that I didn't want. So let's see, anything else on the track? Let's see, I have on the bass track, let's see, nothing on there. I don't want to cut any low end out of the bass guitar, so I have no setting there. I do just have an EQ there in case eventually I want to cut something out. On all the guitars, I believe I cut them all below 250. Yeah, so if you look at all of them, they're all cutting below 250. There might be some lower notes there below middle C, obviously on a guitar part, but I want to make room for my bass and kick, so I just got rid of them. On the organ high, I'm cutting the low end out, but of course on the organ low, I'm leaving nothing. I'm not cutting any low end out because I want that all to be there. On the high pianos, I've gone on both pianos and gone and cut out the low end. On the vocal, I did cut some low end out, but I didn't go as crazy and do it all the way up at 250. I actually lowered my cutoff frequency here on my high pass filter to about 100. I didn't want to go as aggressive. I noticed when I had it at 250, I was like losing some of that low end of the male vocals. So just having it at 100 was better. Sometimes people start at around 70 and work their way up. And I just felt like 70 was a little too low. So 100 was a little bit better. It looks like I also tried to get some mud out. I noticed there was some mud around 1. Maybe the singer was a little bit too close to the mic. And in the reference track, the vocal is very, very bright. So getting rid of some of that 1K kind of helped to brighten up the vocals. And you can see I only did it by I didn't even do it by 3 dB. It was like 2.6 dB. So I just took a very little of 1K out of the mix. But my Q is rather low. So my bandwidth is pretty wide. So if you see, it's also kind of taking out a little bit of 500 and then maybe all the way up to around 2K. So it's kind of only by 2.6 dB reduction, but it is a wider bandwidth here or lower Q value. Let's see, what else we got? That's it. And then I think for the backup vocals, let's see, what did I do? Yeah, for the backup vocals, then I did cut at 250. So I took a lot of the low end out of them. It's a higher vocal part, and I think it just makes it a little bit more airy, and then it doesn't compete with the lead vocal. So those are all my EQ settings. The next thing it says to do is to EQ for weight. So this is instead of cutting values, I'm going to, or cut certain frequencies, I'm going to boost them. So just like in our ear training, you know, sometimes we cut, we practice boosting certain frequencies, but we also will cut them. So when we're EQing for weight, we're going to be boosting. There's a special technique here where we actually will use 2 EQs together. an octave apart. And this is a way that we can actually create quite a bit of weight. So once again, I have a help video within the video here about EQing for weight. You can check that out. But I also just put my like actual settings that I have on each track. So you can see, you could actually just like recreate what I did if you want, or kind of find your own way. If I go here real quick to these tracks, I'll start activating them. I think I did the most work. I'm just going to activate them all. I could hold with them all selected, called Option Command, and that'll activate the whole row. It looks like there's a compressor on that row too, though, so I won't activate that one. Let's see. I think the most work I did was on the kick. Yeah, I actually did quite a bit. This might be a little aggressive, and you can see actually the output of my EQ, it looks like it's clipping a little bit. So I may want to pull that output down. But yeah, you can see I basically tracked the kick at about 40 hertz. Was I thought where that fundamental frequency was. So if you notice, my EQ then is just all in octaves. So I did 40, 80, 160, 320, and then 1.8. So if you can see, I'm basically, the way I set up my EQ is I'm just going an octave higher as I'm making these boosts. So even my boost on my high frequency here, the blue one, that's actually related because it's what, 1, 2, 3, it's 4 octaves above the fundamental frequency. So it's not like I'm just boosting the high on the kick here. I'm specifically boosting 4 octaves above. So yeah, I'm boosting that fundamental frequency at 40. I'm also boosting it at 80 hertz as well, both by 6 dB, and then 3 octaves above that at 1.8. I'm boosting it by 6 as well. So that gives it, here's without, like if we just solo that kick track, here's without the boost. So it's a pretty straightforward kick. It's supposed to be reggae, so it's probably supposed to have a really big thump. So when I add the bypass here, or disengage the bypass, or engage the plugin, that'd be the easiest way to say that, we'll hear some of that low end come through. Yeah, it gives it a lot of weight, and both 40 and 80 hertz. And then we're also getting a little bit of that punch of the higher end. Here's without the higher end. Yeah, so we're really hearing that low end. It sounds quite nice. But with that HF filter there, the high frequency filter at about 1.8, we're getting a little bit more of the punch. Let's hear it. Yeah, we just get a little bit more of the air. Sometimes that can be helpful. You might want to play around and try it lower, at the lower octave at 320 or at 160. And by the way, I just like figured out what the fundamental frequency was, and then either used my brain, or if you're like me, I had to use a calculator, and just kept doubling the number to make sure that I'm boosting and cutting based on the harmonic series. All right, so let's see. Are there any other tracks where I did anything stand out? I think on it looks like here I then boosted something around, it looks like 2.56 kilohertz. Once again, notice I'm still doing the 160, 320, 1.2. So I was trying to stay within the same octaves that I was using on the kick. I don't think I did much. Yeah, then I did something higher at actually 10K. So that would be like 5 octaves above 40 hertz, or 6 octaves above, boosting the very high frequencies on that track. As far as the bass track, it's interesting. So on the bass track, what I did is I left 40 alone. I didn't boost that because that's where my kick is, but I did boost 80 hertz and then also 160. So my bass is going to kind of overlap with the kick, right? Because the kick boost was, let's see here, if I shift click, I can open both at the same time and kind of put them next to each other. So if you look at here, where my bass was boosted by 6 dB at 40 and 80, I'm actually, my kick was boosted at 40 and 80. I'm actually not boosting the bass at 40, but boosting it at 80, and then also 160, an octave above that. And notice I'm only boosting the bass by 3 dB, so not full 6 dB. And then other than that, I'm not adding anything else to the bass. Do be careful though, because if you are seeing these red lights up here at the input-output meters, that might mean you need to turn your input and output down a little bit, because you're clipping the input of that plugin, and that could cause distortion. So when we talk about gain staging, another place that you can be gain staging is not just at your trim at the top of your track, but then also in the EQ boost and cut, or cut and boost plugins. Probably the vocals I did a bunch of work on. The vocals, yeah, I did quite a bit of boosting, not only at around 1K, but also at the octave above it at 2, and then the octave above it at 5. If you remember, though, I did cut a lot of 1 out prior to that, so I am doing a little dog chasing its tail here, where I'm actually, let's see, I'm cutting out around 1K, but then also boosting it there. I do have a compressor in between them, so the compressor is bringing out some frequencies that I just found by boosting 1K. It helped sort of brighten things up a little bit. So great. That's just, so if you notice, sometimes you're EQing for clarity, sometimes you're EQing for weight. If you notice, though, I have one EQ to cut everything, and then I'm leaving a space and then putting an EQ for boosting after it. And the reason I'm doing that is because what we'll learn moving forward is usually between that cut and between the boost, I like to put a third plugin, and that tends to be like, let me do it for the bass here. There's no cut on the bass. There is a boost on the bass, and then in between, I'm putting a compressor. So if you think about it, I'm not cutting any low end on the bass, I'm compressing it, and then I'm further boosting it after the compressor. We'll talk more about that in the next lab, about why we're using compression in between the two. So let's listen to this track now with just this panning and the basic EQ for weight and balance. Let's compare it to the reference track.
Babylana, Babylana, come. You better run. Said the wicked man.
Here's the reference track.
Babylana, Babylana, come. You better run. Said the wicked man, come. Babylana, Babylana, come. You better run.
All right, we're getting closer. I mean, obviously the reference track is so loud, and we'll do some things now here with compression and reverb to kind of bring not only the level up, but then also kind of widen things out and add that reverb to it. So just real quickly, if we go back to the lab, it also says to engage, I put a stereo bus EQ. So that just means I added EQ to the entire mix. So let me go ahead and activate that EQ. I'll play it without, and then I'll just activate it. You can see for the EQ, all I'm doing is kind of, it looks like cutting sort of the mid-range here at around 400.
Babylana, Babylana, come. You better run. Said the wicked man.
Yeah, you can't really hear a huge difference right now, but I think I did that in part because some of the compression and some of the other effects that I did. So let's do this. The next thing we can do is, like I said, I actually hid some compression and time-based effects that I built in the session for you here. So what we're going to do is we're going to show and make those active. So if you notice, I have a hidden drum bus here. So I'm going to right-click on it and say show and make active. That'll raise the level of my drums quite a bit. And then I have one called verb here. So I'll show and make that active. You can notice I have this second master and this other narrator track hidden. Remember, that's just for this walkthrough video. So we'll keep those hidden. We don't need to, and you won't probably see those in your session. They won't be there. Okay, let's listen to this now with these tracks going.
Babylana, Babylana, come. You better run. Said the wicked man.
All right, let me mute the drum bus that we just made active and the verb. Here's without.
Babylana, Babylana, come.
Here's with the drum bus activated.
Babylana, Babylana, come. You better.
Really brings up the drums level. And then if I activate the verb aux here, we're going to hear probably a bunch of reverb and delay.
Babylana, Babylana, come. You better run. Said the wicked man.
Which, if we go in, yeah, there's quite a bit of reverb. If we listen to our reference track,
Babylana, Babylana, come.
It's getting us closer.
Babylana, Babylana, come.
Right? We're still not quite there. So I'm also going to then activate some of the other compressors I have here. I have a lo-fi on the kick. Let's listen to the kick without the lo-fi. Let me mute the verb. I have a pre-fader send going on here. So yeah, here's with the lo-fi. Here's without. Here's with. Yeah, it just gives it a little bit more meat on the bone there. On my bass track, here's without the compressor. Here's with. I'm just command clicking to activate this plugin. Yeah, that just keeps it a little bit more consistent. You can see without the level here is all over the place. When I activate it, it keeps it up a little bit higher. And then on the vocals, I'll add that lo-fi, which is adding some harmonic distortion. Kind of brings that vocal out a little bit more. And then I also just did a slight vocal compressor on here as well. You better. Just keeps it more regular. Listen to that with all those effects now. You better run. Said the wicked man come. Great. So that's getting us closer to that final track. The only other thing I'm going to do is I also put some stereo bus compression on the entire track, so we're going to unbypass that. You'll notice this will make our mix quite a bit louder. Let's listen without, and then I'll unbypass it. Babylon, come. You better run. Said the wicked man come. That really brings it up quite a bit. It actually makes me very loud too, so I'll turn that down a little bit. So yeah, let's compare it. Let's listen to here's the reference track. Babylon, come. You better run. And then here's our track. Babylon, come. You better run. Ours is almost louder now. So we're really getting pretty close to the reference mix now. And remember, there's a kind of an old slogan that says mixing to win. So in other words, we're not just trying to be as good as the reference track. We're trying to be as good as it as also surpassing it and winning or beating the reference track. So with that, that's pretty much the lab. And like I said, you're kind of like, well, what were those settings on the compressor? And like, what is the maximizer doing on the master fader? And that's all things we'll talk about in Lab 8 when we talk about compression. And then you might be kind of interested in like what's going on with this reverb followed by a delay on this aux track and how are we sending things there. By the way, too, if you notice, I even had the sends hidden. So if you open up the sends window, you can see I've actually been sending stuff to this bus submix here, drum bus, as well as to the reverb, the entire mix. You can actually see this send is highlighted blue, which means it's pre-fader, which means it's sending an independent level to the verb or one that's not dependent on what the track's fader level is. So anyways, we'll talk about why we're doing that and how that's helping and how that's making the mix closer when we talk about compression and reverb. As far as this lab, finishing things up, we want to go ahead and bounce the mix. So as always, we'll go back to our Pro Tools session here. I'm going to do Command plus. I'm going to hit the End tab here and just hit Shift and Return. Notice how you like lost the volume there for a second, or I did. It's because when we selected here, I'm actually built in a master fade here at the end. So yeah, it's doing the obnoxious thing where it's not selecting everything. So yeah, there we go. We'll do that. Command Option B to go to your bounce mix window. We're going to want to make sure we have it named properly. Wave, going out, output 1 and 2. We are going to switch it from, we'll leave it interleaved, switch bit depth to 16, keep the sample rate at 44.1. Remember that Red Book audio is 16-bit, 44.1. We want to make sure it goes into the bounce files folder of the current session, not just somewhere randomly on the desktop. So I'm using this finished one. So I'll make sure it goes into that bounce folder and hit open to do that. I'll bounce it offline so I don't have to bounce it in real time. real quickly there. You couldn't hear me because when it's bouncing, all the audio is suspended. So now if I do that, if I go to my desktop here, where is my Lab 7 finished? If I open it up, I should have the audio files all in there. I should have that bounce file that I just made. I don't see it. So did I not? Oh, I did, because that's the start one. I did it in finished. So there's all my audio files. It's still not in there. Let's see. Did I put it into, maybe I put it into start, or where did it go? It looks like it went into the wrong place. It went into this like other random Lab 6 that's sitting on the desktop. So what I'm going to do is, just to be sure, I'm going to Command Option B, bounce it again, and I'm going to double check. Yeah, look at, I put it in the wrong folder. So it's going to happen from time to time on those big jobs. So instead, I'm going to put it in Lab 7, finished. I'll put it in this bounce folder, hit open, and I'm going to go ahead and bounce it in there. Notice if offline is checked, then you don't have to listen to the whole thing while it bounces. It. And now if I go to my Finder and where's that Lab 7 finished that I was working on, I'll open that up. I have the audio files and there's the bounce. Thank goodness. So there's other things in here as well as the wave cache and all that. Remember to save this file. We're going to go ahead and right click on it and compress it. It shouldn't take us too long to compress. It's almost about a gig. These sessions now, they're all going to be a gig plus now. So it may take a little longer to zip them and also upload them. So when you are uploading them to either Google Drive or some type of cloud storage, you may want to do it at school because you just know the internet's it's gonna be a faster connection. And especially in the labs, they're a direct connect via the Cat6 cable. So it'll be faster than trying to transfer it over Wi-Fi. But that's the lab. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to let me know. But that's your introduction to EQing for weight and clarity.